Welcome to the Circle of Birth podcast. I'm your host and advocate, Ali Kranz. These podcasts are here to gather stories, people and information to better our understanding of the wisdom of birth and how we can reclaim our connections to birth from conception and beyond. You will hear stories not only from Australia but from all over the world, bringing together women, partners, midwives, doulas and all the people that have a birth story to share. So jump right in for this next Circle of Birth story. Hi, and welcome to episode 32. And I have found my voice, and I do hope you will go and listen to episode 31, part 1, if you haven't listened to this episode, as it will flow on better for you. So we go for another hour. It's quite unbelievable how much we could really talk about this, and it just goes to show it really needs to be talked about. And I had so many questions and I had to really just sort of not ask as much because I got a bit too excited. But all in all, this podcast really heads into connectivity, community, supporting each other, finding that really important middle ground. And over these 2 episodes, I really felt that I connected to our own birth imprints, how this plays into our children's birth, and then eventually our parenting, and from then on in. So I've, sat with a lot of things here, and we talked right again from the sort of patriarchal influence to breastfeeding and more on Robin's story. He went into his story with his daughter's birth at home. And just a really interesting sort of up and down lead around of conversations around birth and community and his interpretation of that. So I do hope you enjoy this next part. Thank you so much for listening. This is really, really important, and I'm just honoured to share this.
And so when my daughter was born in the lounge room, going back to the lounge room, some of the species that I have to tell you were very helpful to all of us, and particularly helpful to me, were a cat, a kookaburra, and a possum. Because I'm easily reached through my sense of humour. It helps me enormously, and it really helps me when things are brought down from the sublime to the earthly, down to the soil, down to the gutter of real life.
I think you coined it universal cosmic laughter. I can remember. Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Like well, that was definitely part of it, which was wonderful.
I really liked it because I just said, "Oh yeah, I find humor in everything, where everything's funny." And then you were like, "Yeah, universal cosmic laughter or something." And I was like, "That's perfect."
Yeah, it really doesn't help to be grandiose, when you brought down to, look, this is as ordinary as any fleshly thing, and it's messy. Actually, childbirth is bloody messy, ordinary. You're not the first person to be involved in it. It's been happening to every mammal, and since the dawn of time. And don't get too grandiose about it. Don't start playing harps with the angels, okay? Because this is real life. And I actually find that wonderfully helpful. And my daughter was born not in our own house, but in the lounge room of some friends who generously let us have their house while they were interstate for a while. And their house was fantastic because it's surrounded by magnificent trees, but the lounge room overlooks the ocean. And there is something about, and we live in the northern beaches of Sydney, and there is something about the ocean or water. And I'm not going to be able to properly put into words, I don't think, but a lot of people have that feeling of childbirth. There's an attraction to water. There's something about it. We go back to our fish primordial origins, in a sense. And it does something to you to see the ocean. Don't worry, I'm not saying that everyone must do it the same way. They work for us.
Yeah.
And I hear a lot of people say that. And so we were in this lounge room overlooking the ocean. It was nighttime. And so, of course, my friend's got a bunch of cats, which you shouldn't have when you're surrounded by native bushland, but he does.
How much is a bunch of cats?
I think at last count there was about 5 of them.
Okay.
And but, 4 of the cats weren't particularly interested. The old cat, Alistair, his name was Alistair, and he was a wise old cat. And he was right into the whole thing. And I'm forever grateful to Alistair because he, it's kind of like a manger. It reminds me of the Jesus story. There was, they had a cow and a donkey nearby and a sheep, and it was manger-like. It was ordinary and marvelous. We were on the carpet, all of us, and this cat was draped over a chair, just watching the whole thing with, those wonderful, that baleful kind of semi-bored look
I've
that
got the
cats
visual.
get.
Yeah.
They don't get particularly excited until mealtime,
Yeah.
So he's just looking at it going, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
I know what this is. I've seen that hundreds of times. I'm not sure what they're so, intense about. It's a mammal being born. And so he was casually interested, and occasionally I'd look at Alistair and it really reminded me of the sublime ordinariness of it all, and how it's not it's us.
Yeah.
It's the whole story. It's all of humanity.
Yeah.
As it's been done and will continue to be done, and not just humanity, but all of our animal ancestors. And that was just a magnificent touch. Old bloody Alistair on the chair, and then of course our wonderful Australian king of laughter, the kookaburra. We had a one-eyed kookaburra that appeared in the morning. My daughter was born at 5:30. The sun was born around the same time. The sun over the eastern horizon in Sydney, and of course this kookaburra with one eye came, and you can't take yourself seriously when a one-eyed kookaburra. Yeah, I love the songbird sounds of Australia prevent us from taking ourselves seriously at all, because it's either going to be a kookaburra laughing or a parrot squawking.
Yeah.
Yeah, and right, there's nothing grandiose there. It's kind of like, yep, they sound like drunken wharfies in a pub.
Yeah.
And then the possum walks by and has a look in through the open door in the balcony. He jumped in off an angophora tree and takes a look for a while and sniffs, and then walks off on his merry way, thinking, "Yeah, I know what that's all about. Been there, done that." Just the inclusion of our non-human family, was healing, empowering, good. It feels good. It feels good. The trees were swaying. It's part of it all.
Yeah.
Part of the kind of the music of life, really. I really like that, and I'm then when I think of a labour ward with, what is it? What do they have in there? Tiles on the wall, and people that look like aliens speaking through masks and rubber gloves, the snap of rubber gloves and the tinkering of metal, and whatever the disinfectant smells are. It's a solitary confinement from the well-being of the natural world, and it's wrong. It's wrong. It's wrong to do that. It's just a great wrong upon humanity. I do understand sometimes intervention needs to happen, but no one is ever going to convince me that it needs to be the way that we do it, or the sheer amount to which we medically intervene.
I was just thinking, it's so close to death, birth. I know with my own daughter, who was the same. She was born at home and it was all quiet and peaceful. And one of the things that came into my head not long after her birth was like, this is how we should die. This is how we should be honoured to die this way. We should be able to have the avenue to die this way. And that really stuck with me. And it's so close, those experiences.
I really think so. I hear you. There is like kind of this difficult to explain, but intuitively we feel, some kind of connection between those two ends of life. And for sure. And there's been a clinicalization at both ends. Although one thing that gave me a little bit of comfort is that both of my parents died, and my wife's parents died. All four of them died over the last, I think, 7 or 8 years, one after the other. And I found that the treatment of death is getting a little better. I was surprised in a pleasant way.
Yeah.
That even in hospitals, there's I actually felt included and held, and it felt quite respectful. I'm grateful for that end of things, even in a hospital. Yeah, I like how quite a lot of it was done. I have some high hopes for that, and I'm sure that there's even better things that we can do.
I have high hopes for birth too.
Yeah,
all the in between.
Well, there are some good things to read. There's I wanted to tell you about the Primal Health database. It's called Primal Health database. The famous obstetrician Michel Audin, the French obstetrician, legendary guy, a massive campaigner and reformist for natural childbirth, and he got together a team of experts and provided an incredibly powerful database. They collect every little piece of scientific research and social scientific research about how birth affects every aspect of human functioning, even 50 years after birth. And so the database is really helpful because there's a search field. You can search about everything, how childbirth can potentially influence all kinds of stuff. Eating disorders, diabetes, mental health issues, depression, all kinds of a huge A to Z of stuff. So if you do a keyword search, Primal Health database, and primal health is a term coined by Michel Audin. It just means primal meaning, the first thing, the basic, right, the start of life, prenatal and perinatal. He's an amazing, and he's one of the things that Michel Audin articulates really, really well is how transformative it would be for society should we address childbirth far more naturally than we do and give it back to women.
Yeah.
And it's going to do far more than just make childbirth a happier time. It has an impact on every other aspect of social functioning.
Yeah.
It would literally transform the way our society works. Right.
I would say that in our wholeness as our own bodies and our health too, especially with disease management and the health system, is that we need to take back our birth, our bodies, and take responsibility for our decisions and inform ourselves in that way.
And look, I am no feminist at all, and I refuse to consider myself as one. I'm not an ist of any kind. I believe in the balance. But this is a feminist issue, right? Because some things are for men. This thing is for women. It's supposed to be women in charge of your own bodies, your own destiny in childbirth, and the education should come mostly from women. Occasionally there are men that are very gifted in that area, but you got to pass a few tests first, mostly as women. And the whole politic of childbirth, that needs to go completely back to women.
Yeah.
Right? I do think that should be, the number one feminist issue. It's not that the other feminist issues aren't important, but, if you think that there aren't women in a boardroom and that's a bad thing, there's no women running birth. I mean, the very bottom line of life, that's insane. That is insane. It's an insane state of affairs.
I'm just thinking of a line in your book that stuck with me about judgment, the heart-to-heart parenting. Maybe we can talk a bit about that too.
Uh-huh.
That's your second publication. Your first one was Parenting for a Peaceful World?
Yes.
Yes. The judgment of being a parent. I should do this, I should do that. Your child should sleep this long. Your child shouldn't be wearing that sort of stuff. You shouldn't be eating that food. Goes on and on and on, that you're just so clouded with guilt and all sorts of feelings. And I'm just resonating again with how similar it is to parenting, birth, your body, and as a female, as soon as you become pregnant, it's on, you're barraged with what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing. And again, it's just so vital that we can reclaim back our decisions and our intuitive ability to listen to our body. And again, I've talked to so many people on this podcast, and it's all coming back to, just like you said, that we need to reclaim this space and find deep within our intuition and guide from there. And we shouldn't create this bubble of judgment and am I doing the right thing? Am I not doing the right thing? Clouds of doubt when, we are completely cosmic. And, I feel sometimes we put so much stock into science to this point where it's so much nicer to say that the dolphins come and celebrate birth because that's what they do, because they're like these rainbow magical creatures that are a part of this world, as opposed to they're picking up on a 20th decibel of like your vibrational energy and blah, 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 blah. And it just ruins that connection for us inwardly and what we truly feel that it could be, and the story and the...
Yeah, I mean, there is
the
something
journey.
that when we compulsively reduce things to, hormones and megahertz, that has an impact of removing the emotion around it.
Yeah.
And, it's only to reduce things to, quantifiable little measures is useful for some purposes, but, and fair enough, but we need the poetic.
Yes.
Our hearts function differently.
Yeah. We need the stories.
Surrender to that poetic, languaging. It is helpful to have scientific information, and at the same time, there's other state in which we need to not have things language scientifically all the time, but sometimes we need to be able to drop into the emotional, that feeling state.
Yeah, of course.
And it's like there's two gears, and the problem is when we get stuck in one side or the other.
Yeah.
But to have a fluidity between the two, that's for me, that feels really, really necessary. Like when I wrote my first book, Parenting for a Peaceful World, I wasn't going to say anything that couldn't be backed up by either science or history or anthropology. So if you look at that book, it's got a huge bibliography, and that appeals to me. I need that. I hunger for the scientific side of things. And then when I've been in there too long, I realize that I'm going very dry, and I need to get out of there and come back to the poetic and the musical ways of expression, where I'm just happy that the dolphins came, and I don't give a damn if they came because of the kilowatts or the megajoules or who gives a shit about it. You know, I'm in love with these dolphins and they came and it feels very special, you know.
Yeah.
And you can't let down into these kinds of delicious feelings of life if you keep on going up into your head every single time and quantifying the hell out of everything. But both of those states, I think, are important. And so therefore, for new parents, it's both. It's having the support and the help to tap into your intuition, what your body's telling you, and learning how to trust those deeper signals that come from inside you so that you're more capably able to filter cultural information and decide what you want and what you reject. So that's one. And on the other hand, there is a place for advice from elders, a helpful thing. The way I think of it is this: we are instinctual creatures, but because we're very sophisticated animals, our instincts don't just come out. We're not like spiders where you just automatically know how to weave the perfect web and nobody had to teach you. If you think about it, with all of the important things of life, we have the instinct that is like the fuel that makes us want to go there. But we're kind of hopeless unless we learn from each other. We're social animals. We take instruction from each other. When you think about it, that applies to lovemaking. We continue to be, more tuned in to lovemaking the older we get. It's a learning process. So there's all kinds of room for communication and advice. Breastfeeding. I tell you what, if advice about breastfeeding stops, it's going to die, no matter how instinctual it is. There needs to be elder women who give tips and hints on how it can go easy. Quite a bit of breastfeeding failure happens because there wasn't good advice, and not just advice, but the emotional support of elder women. Yeah. So, and because breastfeeding was almost completely killed around the globe by the commercialization, the commercial interests of baby formula companies, extremely powerful pharmaceutical companies, super powerful. They murdered breastfeeding around the world. It almost had gone completely by the 60s and 70s. So there was no elders left, no grandmothers that knew how to teach daughters, and there was no more aunties left that could teach daughters how to approach breastfeeding. It's instinctual, but you still need the advice.
Yeah,
you do,
and the encouragement.
And the encouragement, the normalization, the support when it's tiring, the holding, the massage, the song of the aunties, the song of the grandmothers. You take them out, breastfeeding will gradually die, and it almost entirely did. And then the Western world panicked because we realized that as a global experiment to remove breastfeeding from the human species and replace it with an artificial formula, that was causing an epidemic of all kinds of health hazards, including diabetes. So, the World Health Organization and lactation experts, all the people that understand why breastfeeding is utterly impossible to replace properly with a formula, they panicked and they said, we've got to bring this back, and they're fighting very hard. They've had to invent a profession, the lactation consultants, to help to support, educate, and advise women on the art of breastfeeding. They've had to invent a profession. It's like professional aunties and grandmothers that women have been deprived of, and that's why women end up feeling guilty and et cetera, but it's not mother's fault. Don't feel guilty, for Christ's sakes. Get angry. This was robbed. If you read the history of how breastfeeding was robbed, I guarantee you'll feel furious because it was robbed. And it was robbed in every continent. in all countries.
Yeah, it was well marketed, wasn't it?
Extremely aggressively marketed and unbelievably dishonestly marketing. I mean, bold-faced, flagrant lies of the worst kind. The most nefarious marketing tactics you could imagine.
I guess
it's stuff that I would leave those tactics to drug pushers in the street.
It was pretty brutal back then. That was around like DDT and all those sort of things that were happening in that time too, or even before that it was happening. But
yeah, with the only difference being that sometimes there's a genuine reason why you need formula, and it can be a life-saving thing. You know, there is that tiny minority. So, you know, then what a blessing. Or sometimes mum is so sick or whatever, you know. It's a blessing that the formula exists and that, you know, the science of it, you know, makes it better and better and better and reduces the health hazard involved. So, but to make it global like that has been, I think, an enormous human rights abuse that was done.
I know there's this huge divide that we just can't seem to meet in the middle. It always has to be something versus something, like breast versus bottle or home birth versus hospital. And when you have one or the either, then you're thought to be against the other, if that makes sense. Like if you're a lactation consultant, you're thought to be anti-bottle. If you're a home birther, you're thought to be anti-hospital. And
I find that really, really tiring. That kind of either or, anti. It's just become a really neurotic kind of a argument. But
I'm just looking in terms of like the aggressive marketing of formula companies. It's still playing out, isn't it, in our modern world, that especially with social media, that we have these little agents here and there that are just fueling the anger and keeping that divide going. I
mean, there is like an international agreement on the marketing of baby formula, sponsored by World Health Organization and UNICEF. And the formula companies keep on, finding their way through the cracks and, you know, doing it indirectly and subtly. And, they're not going to let go of it's a massive cash cow, pardon the pun, but it's a gigantic cash cow, and they've got shareholders to please. Where this gets very, very muddled is that when lactation consultants come to help mothers, there's a reaction that happens in which mothers end up feeling guilty.
Yeah.
And then they're angry and they called the breastfeeding counsellors. The common name is breastfeeding Nazi.
Yeah, I've heard that one, yeah.
I've heard it maybe 10,000 times. It gets it's like a war. So,
or I've heard lactivists as well, which is...
in a very negative kind of connotations around. So that the mere mention of the information then becomes explosive. Mothers and really mothers have been caught between these two worlds. You know, there's lots to be said about this, and it really, when it comes to mother guilt, we could spend a couple of hours talking about it. It's a very, very important, very, very important issue. And then also mums get trapped in countries like Australia, where, you know, Australia is one of the most ungenerous countries when it comes to paid maternity leave. It's got one of the lowest provisions in the entire developed world. You see, a country like Sweden has got twice the breastfeeding rate, but Sweden will pay you as a mother whatever you were earning before you gave birth. 80% of what you were earning, the government will pay it to you from taxpayer revenue for 18 months.
Yeah, heard that.
And you hang out with your, other friends who have children and but not have to go to the workplace. and not fear for your mortgage
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
And you can then extend it to 3 years in a lower rate. So, you can't just say to mums breastfeeding is better. Scientifically, it just is. But you can't just say that and then not provide the real life support. Because it's not just easy. It's not just easy, just like that.
Yeah.
You have to feel like you're safe enough to be able to settle into regular breastfeeding. And, it's a whole generation that most mothers were either not breastfed or breastfed very, very little, so that there isn't much of the body memory of that. So, I'm not surprised that a lot of the mums feel very angry when the advice comes,
Yeah.
But, in the deeper sense, this is not mother's fault. This was stolen, and it was stolen by commercial interests. It's another area in which mothers have been kind of separated from the maternal supportive world, divorced from the grandmothers and the aunties and the elder women who are there to help in a genuine way. Yeah. It also helps when, the very act of breastfeeding has been quarantined. How often do you go outside and you're walking down the street and you see mothers breastfeeding? Even now, you hardly ever see it. Even now.
Yeah. Yeah.
People still get squeamish about it. I mean, that's another insanity.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's not normalized. It's not normalized. There is all kinds of body issues around it. If you grow up in a world where every day you see mothers breastfeeding wherever you go, that has a very profound effect in how you relax into that when it's your turn. But mums are kind of cut off from that. Yeah. The first act of breastfeeding you might see is your own. How the hell's that supposed to work?
Yeah. Yeah, I can really relate. Like, I had no exposure to breastfeeding, growing up in my teens, my 20s, nothing. Like, when I was first pregnant, I had no idea what birth meant or what breastfeeding really was until I breastfed my own baby. So I probably had never really even seen breastfeeding happen or anything like that. So I had no concept of that as being something that I grew up into, and it's that shame that we've carried through as in our childhood from our parents and our parents' parents, and that it just goes on and on.
And dads as well.
And
Dads are really. There's a lot of dads that I worked with and that are quite confronted by when their first baby's born, and they find it difficult when their wives are breastfeeding. There's all kinds of deep kind of issues that come up, including jealousy. And your dads just aren't prepared for this. We have been divorced from the reality of what it is to have a baby in the house. So dads get shocked. And they get upset and they say, listen, you haven't given me much attention lately. And by the way, that was my breast to suck.
Exactly, yeah.
Maybe that baby's had enough. He's already been drinking from your body for 3 months. That'll do. Thank you very much.
Yeah, back to me.
Get him off. That was my place before.
Yeah.
My place at your breast. Catching up with the breastfeeding that I didn't get when I was a baby, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, all of those feelings are very subterranean but very powerful, and they become more powerful when we don't acknowledge where those feelings really come from. And I can't tell you how many dads find that kind of difficult. And then there's irritability and conflict, and it's tragic. Tragic. It puts a wedge between mums and dads. Dad start agitating for the baby to be out of the bed, and baby to be out of the room. We're very confused about what a baby actually wants and needs, and how to have our own happy life with a baby in the house, so that it's not, us against baby.
Yeah, and that's for everything, isn't it? This versus this. It should never be that. We need to find that balance within.
Well, that's where elders we need our elders to show us how to do that. We need grandmothers and grandfathers to come in and say, look, I've been through that. I can help you. You look tired. Let me hold your baby while you sleep. Yeah. Gosh, if you guys want to make love, then maybe your bedroom's not the only place where you can be intimate while your baby sleeps. Come on. There's the messy reality and the lovely, beautiful reality of family relationships. Everything's become so, I think, in the modern world, so kind of boxed. And unnecessarily so, and gosh, families just splinter and fragment as a result. Yeah. So, we need those role models of families that maintained a loving, where the parents maintain a loving and intimate connection. Of course, sexuality will be less frequent for a while for most people. I think that's inevitable. We get tired. We need role models that have some experience at how to make all of the different intimacies live gracefully around each other, where there's enough sleep and there's enough closeness, and where we all have our feelings heard, baby, mum, and dad. It's doable. It's kind of a dance, and it's not. There's no military order. I promise you that. It's messy and chaotic and unpredictable, but okay and beautiful. But we do need elders who know how to hold that space to talk us through it, particularly when it's our first time. I really believe in elders. I tell you, I guess I've raved on about that, haven't I? But it feels very, very important to me.
Yeah, me too. I wholeheartedly agree too, and I'm always in my journey seeking elders. Robin, I want to wrap it up with just quickly your book, Heart to Heart Parenting, and I know it's your second one. And I was, just reading here what precisely we talked about. You've written here a case study about Jill. She was told that she's got the perfect life, she's got the house, the husband, and she should be happy, and she always resonated with this feeling that something wasn't quite right and wasn't connecting properly to her children. And feel a lot what's happening in our parenting journey, and I quite resonated with that, and I'm really enjoying reading this book.
Yeah, Ali, I mean, quite simply, my experience is that we're primarily creatures of connectedness. And yes, we do want, security and just a basic kind of prosperity. We want a roof that we know that we can rely on, and we want security of food and a place to have our kids be educated. But our greatest, most primary need is about connectedness, and we feel connected when we're part of more than just a nuclear family, but something larger, a community, and that there's people in our lives that we feel emotionally safe with. That emotional safety is what creates that deep, that state of connectedness that we feel in our guts and in our hearts. We can't do without that. We can't. We don't. We get angry, we get sick, we get lonely, we get empty. And there's lots of people that say, look, I've got all the trappings, I've got the right house, and I've got, the right cars, and my kids have both arms and legs on, and, therefore I'm happy. Well, I'm not. I have the trappings of happiness. You can have all of that. I know people that have shared a bed their whole life and still don't know one another. So we need to re-find, when I say we, That's not true for everybody, but there's a great kind of epidemic of disconnectedness that is not, it's optional. We absolutely don't need to live that way. There's nothing to say that we have to be disconnected from one another. We thrive on that, and we don't pay enough attention to that collectively. We need people to know how we feel. We need people around us that we feel their empathy. And we need to hear how other people feel. That's it's how we communicate emotion and feeling, all of the emotions. The two-way street of communicating feeling authentically, that's the currency of connectedness. That's when we feel close. And that's a rhythm for human beings. We want to be alone, connecting with ourselves. Sometimes we want space. Sometimes we just need to be among nature. And then it's a rhythm. It's like we hunger again for contact. And we need that. And we've lost how to do that. We've lost the fluency of that. And we're very tragically and very dangerously lost connectedness by artificially creating a world that's about the busy hurry. How much of the day do we spend being in a hurry, complaining we're too busy, accepting that as if it's normal, and instead of living and feeling the moment, completely injecting ourselves into a future outcome that may or may not arrive. It's like living for the retirement plan. You've heard this complaint many times, worded differently, I'm sure. I guess what I'm trying to say is that we simply can't do without that experience of connectedness. That's why sometimes people that have very little are radiantly happy. Because if you're relatively poor materially, but as long as you have enough, but if you are feeling really loved in your community, and there's singing, and there's dancing, and there's contact, and there's feeling and emotion, you're going to be happy. I mean, you're going to be bursting with happiness when that need is taken care of. So we've got a wee bit of reorganising to do in the way that we set up the nuclear family society. Yeah, it's a rhythm. We go between needing space to needing contact and connection, and we do need more than just our nuclear people. You know, I mean, I absolutely I need a sense of village, a sense of community. I just love going down to my local shops. The simple act of buying a loaf of bread and having even some superficial chit chat with people who know each other. We ask, how's the kids? It just it warms me up. Absolutely warms me up from the inside, having a little bit of familiarity with people, and then beyond that, there's one of the things that I really incredibly grateful is that I belong to a circle of men, and we meet every 2 months. We sit in a circle. We're all I'm the baby in the group. I'm 55 years old. I think I'm the youngest or the second youngest. So we're all I guess elders or near elders. And we sit in circle, and no one fixes anybody. We tell story, and we go right down to what counts for us, how we're feeling, what we're learning in our lives, what we're struggling with, what we're doing battle with. And it's a very incredibly rich, it's a whole day. We just talk all day.
Sounds wonderful.
And listen to each other a lot. Listening is just as enriching as when it's your turn to speak. Yeah. And we spend no time, very, very little time in the superficialities. We have break for lunch and we have a good laugh and we talk rubbish and, whatever it is, chit chat. But then we get down to brass tacks when we sit back in circle in the afternoon. And I can't do without that. I need that level. And we only meet once every 2 months, but that essential, I do think we need people in our lives beyond family, where we feel held in that way.
Yeah.
And our kids benefit from that.
Yeah. And this is where men need to step up, I feel, especially, 30s, 40s, and guide, and the elders too, especially, and
Yeah.
guide these young pre-teenage boys where they're first, and this is again that sort of feminine interpretation that can guide them into a space where their first realisation of what is normal with a female, as opposed to what it is now. They'll just go on YouTube and see girls with boobs out and men spanking them, and that's a 14-year-old's first realisation of how to treat a woman. We need more men's and women's circles. We need more of these community circles where we can guide these young people to come through and create a better sense of what's normal and what a woman is and what a male is and what that means to each other as a young person. And the modern world of...
I think so. I think so. I hear you. And the porn industry is almost comprehensively void of any tenderness, any love, any genuine warmth. It's kind of an avoidance of human vulnerability, It's about the fragmentation of body parts. So it's like an abattoir, I think.
Yeah.
It's a fetishization of bits and the effacement of human warmth and connectedness. And, I'm not against porn in principle, but the industry as it stands is an absolute catastrophe in terms of the imagery that it portrays.
What's another big cash cow again, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's gigantic. It's gigantic. It's utterly wow. It's terrifying when you realise the sheer size of the beast. It's enormous. So there's a little bit of repair work. No wonder we're so misbehaved.
Yeah.
When this is how we grow up.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm I love this work. I love working with, issues of parenting and childbirth and working with young people. That is kind of a crucible through which we can create the new in a very, very big way. It's not the only way to produce change in the world. There's many ways, but this is the one that I like and one that I feel is very, very powerful. Yeah. And that's why I wrote my books. And that's why I do the work that I do. And also I really enjoy it. It's a kind of a conversational space that is deep, like with you right now. That's very, very satisfying for me. And it's a mutual kind of an enjoyment, We're not just talking sport and news, are we? We're talking something a little bit more, deeper strata of human life. So,
Yep. And I completely appreciate you spending this time too. There were so many points where I just got so excited and I just wanted to start talking and talking.
Been the longest 15 minutes that
I think we've covered so much and we've left it open for interpretation for so many people.
What's the name of your show? Is it Around the World with Ali Krantz?
No, it should be. The Circle of Birth.
Circle of Life entirely.
Circle of Life, I know. I should just change it to the Circle of Life now, I think. When I started this podcast, I was quite, I'm obviously still going through some huge transformation, but back then it was post-birth of Julia because I had such a transformative experience and I wanted to share the story of the story. I wanted to share stories because I found it such a safe space for people to share in an environment where they're just telling the story. So they're not trying to, say this or that. It's just sharing their experience. But I feel I've had this huge layering peel back of all of what does this really mean? What is it? And now I'm finding that I'm just talking about transformation in not just birth in a physical sense from a woman, but transformation in people.
I love that about when a child comes to your life. You get completely recalibrated. I mean, the things that matter to you just get turned on their head, and you have a new, much larger kind of a outlook, and suddenly you look beyond the smaller circle that you were focused on, and you start getting concerned about planetary things, and that happens. That kind of a quickening process happens to so many of us as parents, doesn't it? And somewhere I think that most of us sense intuitively, without being able to kind of name it right, but we feel intuitively that there's something about how we give birth to our children and how we raise our children. That's how we decide the future of humanity, the destiny of humanity.
Yeah, exactly.
It's deeply personal and private, and yet at the same time so political. You can't separate childhood from politics because it's not separable. It's all intertwined. So of course you think that way. Of course you start thinking about, wow, I want better things to happen for every childbirth and every child and every parent, every mother, every father. This is how our children are growing us up. Because we were continually challenged to open our hearts a bit larger and to learn new things. So mostly what we make is mistakes with our children, I think. Doesn't matter if you think you've written a couple of parenting books, you're in there making the same mistake as everybody else. And feeling the same regret and despair and feeling stupid sometimes, and it's glorious and messy and all at the same time. But it's not. I don't think we get broken from mistakes. I think it's really what we do with it afterwards that makes all the difference. Okay, that's a really important thing to know. Otherwise, you freeze. With all the information that exists out there right now, people are terrified that if you yell at your child, they're going to be damaged forever. And there's a different way to hold the parenting information that's come out, which is that now we understand more about why our children hurt. But hurt doesn't mean damage necessarily. Even a traumatic birth doesn't necessarily just mean you're damaged for life. What is really exciting is how connection heals, and that it's never too late. What heals our hearts and heals our neurology and heals even our brain chemistry, and what heals our gut health, because that's all interlinked, even our gut, is about human connectedness, right? How we come back to connection when there's been a rupture. That's what makes all of the difference.
Yeah, exactly right.
That's the story of parenting. Is half the time we get it wrong, but then there's room to come back afterwards and heal and connect and listen to each other, listen to what our kids have to say about us. Say sorry if we feel that, if that's appropriate. And just accept that it's, we don't get it right. What we do is we grow. So there we are, Ali. And look, I've really enjoyed talking with you. I really appreciate that.
Could you tell us your website, and then everyone can link to find your books?
Okay, if you're listening and you use pens and pencils like people from the last millennium, take your pen and pencil and hold it firmly in your dominant hand and pick a piece of paper. I'm giving you some time, or whatever. You write it on your iPad, on your smartphone. So here's my website. It's ouremotionalhealth.com, except there's little hyphens between the words. Just warning you. So it's our-emotional-health.com. But these days, you don't need the address, do you? You can just Google things.
Yeah, I'm sure if you start typing Robin, your last Google will be like, did you mean this?
Robin Grille, Our Emotional Health.
Yeah.
and your favorite search engine.
We'll figure it out.
I'm not going to give all of the power to Google.
Yes, yeah.
They can bloody well pay their tax.
Yeah.
So whatever your Ecosia is, I think is called a really good search engine. They plant trees with their proceeds.
Awesome.
Yeah, and you so search Robin Grille, Our Emotional Health, and you come to my website.
And don't do what I did, and I spent like ages typing this in. On page 12 of your book, you forgot to put the hyphen in between emotional and health. So it's like r-emotionalhealth, one word.com.
And what happened?
That's my little mistake that I found there.
And you couldn't find my website?
No, and it didn't find it. Because I was trying to do the emotional intelligence quiz. I was trying to get that up. That's
cruel, that is.
Yeah, it is cruel.
Okay.
It was cruel.
There's also my blog is heart-to-heartparenting.org.
Ah, great. Yeah.
And that's all one word, heart-to-heartparenting.org. And I've got all kinds of stuff in there. Just little things to read about the state of affairs for the world's children and how child rearing reforms are changing the world. And I announce whenever I'm running public workshops, I put it in there. And then, the world is moving into virtual reality. And, so there's a lot of my stuff up on YouTube and podcasts like your terrific one. And there you go, an absolute abundance of info.
Thank you.
Great talking with you, Ali.
Yes.
Thank you.
Did you connect with this episode? Then head over to our website, circleofbirth.com. There you'll find show notes, pictures, resources, and potentially connect with today's storyteller. Don't forget to sign up to be updated with new empowering episodes and content. Help the show grow by contributing a tip in the jar to make sure we can continue to better the podcast and connect more and more to the wisdom of birth and each other. Hey, and don't forget the iTunes rating. This has been another episode of the Birth Share Project. We breathe, we birth, we empower.